A young man in silk walks through the emperor's palace. To the world, he looks like royalty, but he is not a prince. He is a concubine, chosen for desire, not for power. His life was luxury on the outside, and a prison within. The palace glitters with gold, but behind its beauty lie shadows few dare to speak of. Concubines were said to live in comfort, surrounded by music, art, and endless riches. Yet for men chosen to serve the emperor in this hidden role, that comfort came at the cost of freedom. Their every smile was rehearsed, their every step watched, their very existence dependent on the emperor's fleeting favor. Some were celebrated in secret. Others vanished without a trace, and almost all were forgotten, their names erased from history, their pain sealed behind palace walls. But that silence leaves us with a haunting question. What really happened to male concubines in ancient China? And why was their life far more tragic than we imagine? To understand his world, we must step inside the palace itself. In ancient China, the emperor was not just a ruler. He was the son of heaven. His word was law, his body sacred, and even his private desires carried the weight of politics. Within the forbidden city, thousands of concubines lived behind guarded walls. Most were women, selected for beauty, talent, or family alliances. Some came from noble clans to strengthen political ties. Others were taken from ordinary households, chosen for their looks or grace. To the outside world, it looked like privilege, a life of silk robes, endless banquets, and the honor of serving the emperor. But beneath the gold, concubinage was never simply about love or passion. It was a tool of power. To share the emperor's bed was to exist at the very heart of the empire, where whispers could shape dynasties and the birth of a child could alter the line of succession. And yet, hidden among the countless women, there were men, rare, seldom spoken of, and often erased from official history. Male concubines were chosen not for politics, but for the emperor's personal desire. Their role was delicate, secretive, and dangerous. To be close to the emperor was to live in a place of both privilege and peril. A smile might keep you alive. A single rumor might end your life. For these men, there was no clear path to power, no legacy, no future beyond the palace walls. They were possessions, admired in silence, envied in whispers, and condemned by history to near invisibility. Yet in their shadows, we see a truth the records tried to bury. The emperor's favor could make a life seem like paradise, or turn it into a nightmare overnight. But how did a young man find himself inside this hidden world? The path to becoming a concubine was never one of choice. It was a path carved by others, by families, by officials, by the emperor himself. Some were taken from noble households, offered as tokens of loyalty. Others came from humbler origins, noticed for their beauty, their grace, or their talent with poetry, music, or dance. For a family desperate to rise, sending a son to the palace could seem like fortune, an honor to be close to the emperor. Yet for the young man himself, it often meant surrendering everything, his freedom, his name, even the right to dream of a future beyond the palace walls. Before entering service, the chosen were carefully prepared. They were trained to walk with elegance, to bow with precision, to speak only when spoken to. They learned the arts of music and poetry, the subtle ways to flatter and entertain. But they also learned silence. A concubine's greatest weapon was obedience, and a single mistake could be fatal. The selection itself was like a performance. The emperor or his trusted eunuchs would judge appearance, manners, and talent. A gentle face, delicate hands, a graceful voice, these were not blessings but chains disguised as gifts. Those chosen would be adorned in silks and jewels, but in truth, they were stripped of their past. Their families could no longer claim them. Their lives no longer belonged to themselves. For women, there was at least the faint hope of bearing an heir, of securing a place in history. But for men, there was no such destiny. They were ornaments, prized for as long as the emperor's desire lasted. Once it faded, they were forgotten, pushed aside, or worse. And so, the moment a young man stepped through the palace gates as a concubine, he entered not a life of honor, but a life of uncertainty. Every smile he gave might keep him alive another day. Every glance could spark envy. From the very beginning, his beauty was not his blessing. It was his curse. Once chosen, The concubine's world shrank to the palace walls. From the outside, it looked like paradise. Grand halls lined with jade, gardens filled with rare flowers, music drifting through candle-lit chambers. He wore silks finer than anything his family could have imagined. He dined on delicacies while the people outside the gate starved. To outsiders, his life seemed like a dream. But behind the beauty, there was a silence heavy with fear. Every move was watched. Eunuchs guarded the chambers, recording who entered, who left, who whispered too long in a corner. Concubines lived in gilded rooms, yet they were prisoners all the same. Even laughter was measured, for too much joy could look suspicious, and too much sorrow could be dangerous. The male concubine's position was even more fragile. Female consorts resented him, seeing him as a rival for the emperor's attention. Eunuchs whispered behind his back, some plotting his downfall, others jealous of his closeness to the throne. Ministers disapproved, but could not openly challenge the emperor's desire. That left him stranded in a web of jealousy, where one wrong word could spark a storm. Loneliness was his constant companion. He could not choose friends freely, nor could he love openly. His heart, his body, his future, all were bound to one man, and that man's favor could change in an instant. To be ignored meant fading into obscurity. To be favored meant living under a spotlight so bright it burned. And so, each day became a performance. He rose with the dawn, dressed in perfection, and waited. Would the emperor call for him tonight? Would a rival whisper poison in the emperor's ear? Would tomorrow bring rewards or ruin? Inside those walls, the concubine was both worshipped and despised, adored and envied, treasured and trapped. His world was made of gold, but it was gold that weighed heavy, pressing down with every passing day. Behind the laughter, behind the music, there was always the quiet knowledge. One wrong step, and the palace could turn from heaven to hell. And it was in that fragile balance where desire revealed its darkest edge. In the palace, favor was a dangerous gift. One night of the emperor's attention could lift a concubine to dizzying heights. The next night, it could paint a target on his back. Desire was not love. It was a fire that burned bright but always threatened to consume. When the emperor summoned him, the concubine was showered with silks, jewels, and praise. His name might echo in whispers through the halls. Eunuchs bowed lower, and rival consorts grew restless. Yet the brighter his star shone, the darker the shadows grew around him. Jealousy was sharp, and envy spread like poison. A concubine adored by the emperor risked becoming the most hated soul in the palace. Female consorts feared being replaced in the emperor's bed. Eunuchs, long trusted by the emperor, whispered warnings of corruption. Ministers in the court, bound to Confucian traditions, muttered about morality. To them, a male concubine was not only a scandal but a threat, proof of the emperor's weakness. Their solution was simple: remove the threat quietly before he could stir more unrest. And so, rumors became weapons. A single accusation of arrogance, of betrayal, of secret alliances could undo him overnight. Some were accused of plotting with eunuchs. Others were accused of disrespecting the emperor's majesty. Many never knew their true crime until punishment fell: a cup of poisoned wine, a sudden illness, an order to vanish from the chambers and never return. Even desire itself was a curse. The emperor's passion was unpredictable. His affection could turn to suspicion, his amusement to anger. To displease him, even by silence or hesitation, was to invite disaster. The same lips that kissed one night could demand execution the next, and so the concubine lived on the edge of a blade, adored and despised, safe and hunted, all at the same time. His beauty, once the reason he was chosen, now became his greatest danger. In the palace of 10,000 rooms, he had nowhere to hide from the one truth he carried each night. The emperor's desire could give him life, or take it away in an instant. Every concubine knew the truth. Favor never lasted. The emperor's gaze wandered, and with it, their lives could collapse in a single night. For a male concubine, the fall was swifter, the punishment harsher. History may have tried to erase their names, but whispers of their fates linger in the shadows. Some were quietly dismissed. Stripped of silks, their fine chambers taken away, they were left to live in silence, wandering the palace like ghosts. Others faced harsher ends. Ministers who despised their presence sometimes pushed for execution, hiding it beneath charges of corruption or arrogance. A young man once adored might be summoned for wine, only to find the cup laced with poison. Another might fall suddenly ill, his body carried away before dawn, no questions asked. For the unlucky, disgrace was worse than death. Rival consorts, furious at losing the emperor's affection, wove plots of betrayal. A whisper here, a lie there. Soon the emperor doubted even the concubines' loyalty. And in a world where loyalty was everything, doubt was fatal. Some were dragged away in the night, their footsteps echoing in empty halls, never to return. Others were buried in unmarked graves, their names forbidden from official records. Imagine the moment. A concubine, once dressed in silk and surrounded by music, kneels on cold stone floors hearing the decree of his death. The same emperor who once smiled upon him now orders his silence forever. No protest, no appeal. Only the clang of guards' footsteps and the flicker of lanterns marking his final night alive. The breaking point was not always a loud spectacle. Often it was quiet, hidden behind the red walls of the palace. A life snuffed out like a candle, leaving only the faintest trace in rumor, never in history. And yet, in that silence, one truth was clear. To be chosen as a concubine was not a blessing. It was a fate that ended sooner or later in tragedy, and if life inside the palace was uncertain, death brought no peace. For many concubines, their fate was tied not only to the emperor's moods in life, but also to his death. When an emperor passed, his concubines were left in limbo, powerless, unwanted, and often seen as dangerous reminders of the past. Some were cast out of the palace, stripped of silks, and sent away with nothing. Others were forced to remain in seclusion, locked within empty halls, forbidden to remarry or even step beyond the gates. To live on after the emperor was to become a shadow, forgotten by the court, erased from memory. But for some, the end was even darker. Ancient practices sometimes demanded that concubines follow their emperor into death. Female consorts were buried alive in his tomb, sealed underground as companions for eternity. For male concubines, their existence was so scandalous that their deaths were often quiet, unrecorded. They were erased to protect the emperor's image, their names struck from history so completely that even their families dared not speak of them, and so, their legacy was silence. Official records spoke little of them, leaving only fragments, poems, rumors, hidden writings that hint at their existence. To historians, they remained ghosts, half seen in the margins of chronicles. To the empire, they were inconvenient truths, locked away behind the same walls that once imprisoned them. Yet in that silence, a lesson endures. Their lives reveal the darker side of absolute power. How beauty could be twisted into chains, how desire could become a death sentence, and how history itself could conspire to bury the truth. They lived in luxury but died in obscurity, and in that obscurity lies the final tragedy, to be forgotten, as though they had never lived at all. Now picture him one last time, the young man in silks, walking through candlelit halls. To the world he was adorned in beauty and privilege, but inside he carried the weight of chains. His smile was a mask, his luxury a cage, and when the flames of favor died out, so did he. No songs, no monuments, only silence. The tragedy of the male concubine is not just in his suffering, but in how thoroughly history tried to erase him. The records tell us so little, because emperors wanted it that way. Desire was dangerous when it strayed from the accepted path. And so, their names were struck out, their voices lost, their bodies buried without honor. All that remains are fragments, whispers, and shadows hidden in the folds of time. Yet perhaps that silence speaks louder than words. It reminds us that power does not only build, it destroys. That behind every empire's grandeur are lives sacrificed to its image. And that sometimes the greatest tragedies are not the ones we remember, but the ones we are forced to forget. So the next time you hear of the Forbidden City, of emperors who lived in untouchable splendor, imagine the forgotten figures who walked behind them. Figures who dressed in silk, who were adored in secret, and who vanished without a trace. Their tragedy was not just in how they lived, but in how they were erased. History may have forgotten their names, but tonight You have not. If you found this story haunting and eye-opening, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves history's hidden truths. More tales of power, desire, and forgotten lives await in our next episode.